Yeah, I think that if one looks at outcomes like stroke, like myocardial infarction, they all sort of accumulate heavily in this population with metabolic syndrome and inflammation. So, what are you doing um, at Abbott and you, you, Dr. Adamson, in this area to how do you fit into this problem and wrestling with it?
We're very fortunate as a company in general, as you know, to have remarkable scientists that have developed innovations from the diagnostic perspective, but also from an innovative perspective to support people who have acute circulatory collapse with our Centromag product that now is FDA temporarily approved for the delivery of extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. That process is used for the most severe of COVID-19 cases, and has really the community has learned to think about that earlier in the process. If you think about it too late, it may be too late. So we've been very fortunate to have our relationships that were immediately available at the beginning of the pandemic, and recognizing that it would take time for science to test hypotheses and develop data to guide people on how to treat this syndrome. So therefore, we actually brought people together from Paris and Barcelona and other places through Europe as they were battling in the throes of this battle. Brought them together with American physicians who were geared up and ready to go, but they hadn't yet seen a lot of cases, to kind of have an exchange of information as to practically how does this present? What should I look for? How do I deal with this? And that turned out to be a very effective way to help people understand how do we get prepared to have this pandemic come about. And then when the hot spots in the United States hit, we shifted to bring folks, for example, from New York City, New Orleans, Michigan, those hot spots together on webinars that were very well attended, so that people could learn from them. Because it did seem, at least early on, that there were geographic variations in the way the infection and the syndrome was really exhibiting itself, as we learned. Subsequently, since the beginning of the pandemic to now, there's been well over 12,000 papers published in peer-reviewed journals about COVID-19. And so we have obviously this amazing burst of information and data, but still the practical aspects of what do you do in this situation, I think, are incredibly important for people to understand and not have to experiment, not have to learn on the job type thing. And we believe that's been very effective. The feedback we've had has been really remarkable. To bring a general preparedness from a practical perspective. So not only are our products are available and innovations available, but also we've brought that information together. And maybe, and I'll just complete this in that, as we move forward, it's clear that this is going to be with us for a long, long time. And the more we see this change and fundamentally the way we practice medicines from a face-to-face, somewhat paternalistic model of I'm the doctor, you're the patient, just listen to me, look in my eyes and come see me and I'll heal you type thing. That's changed. That's not going to come back for a long, long time, if ever. And I think patients now recognize that they can see the doctor over a telemedicine approach and have a virtual visit and not have to travel, and that's a really big deal to them. So our innovations to be able to remotely monitor a heart failure patient, for example, with a pulmonary artery sensor, gives the physician now everything that they would need that they would try to get while they had the patient face-to-face. So a sensor-based technology for remote and virtual management of these patients, I think has now moved quickly to the forefront of how we move forward with our new models of medicine.
So this sensor that you referenced, how many, is this approved? If it's approved, how many patients have it? If it hasn't been approved, where are you in the approval process?
This is the CardioMEMS heart failure system, and it's a small micro electromechanical system chip that's placed in the pulmonary artery permanently. It doesn't have a battery or lead, and so it's interrogated from an external antenna, and that's how it's empowered to measure pressures in the pulmonary artery. And it's those pressures that change as patients get sick with heart failure. And so, as you know, heart failure is a chronic disease. It's around for a long, long time, and it's characterized as fluctuations in clinical stability. 95% of the time when patients get sick enough to come in the hospital, it's because they've accumulated too much volume in their system, too much fluid in their blood vessels, and that fluid leaks out in their lungs. They get so sick that they're drowning. They have to come in the hospital to get rescue therapy. We now are able to identify when that kind of volume change is happening long before patients develop symptoms. We don't have to wait till they get symptoms. We now can naturally control their volume system remotely with these daily uploads and weekly reviews. So the system is automated. It's been around since FDA approved in 2014. It's been well over 20,000 patients who've benefited from this system. We're still investigating the populations that will benefit from hemodynamic guided care, but when compared to just standard medical management and follow-up, heart failure patients do so much better with hemodynamic guided care remotely. So this virtual medicine model is I'm really happy that we had it and available, so that when we move to a virtual medicine model, it's one that we can do with intelligence, with personalized medicine.
Have you or other investigators started to accumulate data that would give us some evidence on the value of this sensor in the epidemic, some case series or some sort of case control thing, design that would provide some insight on whether this remote monitoring made a difference in this population?
Absolutely, and in fact, Peter, it's interesting. I hear a lot when people see me, they say, "Phil, I just wish every patient that I have with heart failure had a CardioMEMS system, because it just clears up everything. You can't use a cell phone and estimate jugular venous pressure by sort of simulating a physical examination remotely, and so you just don't get a very good physiologic handle on what the patient's system is like." So having that information has revolutionized essentially many of the physicians' care that have been just dumped into this virtual care environment. You got to realize that people went from the traditional thousands of year old model of medical delivery, and overnight went from 100% face-to-face to 100% virtual visits. I mean, it's been amazing how we've been thrown into the deep end of the pool and forced to swim. And physicians have done a remarkable job. And when CardioMEMS is in place, now the patient doesn't have to come to the hospital for exacerbation, but they don't have to come to the office to be exposed to the things that they could get just coming to the office.
Well, but is there any sort of study that would examine and find evidence for the efficacy of this sensor? That you could design the study in any number of ways, I suppose, but is there any sort of real world evidence study going on that would inform us about the value of this sensor in this context of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, you're right. We've not been able to design and implement one specifically for COVID-19, but I will say that we just completed a 1,200 patient real world study that was in this environment. The tail end was in this environment, and demonstrated around a 57% reduction in the need for hospitalization compared to historic controls. We will complete the follow-up of a 1,000 patient prospective randomized clinical trial in an enlarged population in whom we think that this hemodynamic guided strategy would be effective. That enhanced or enlarged indication is being tested in a trial called GUIDE-HF, which is we'll follow up in December of this year, and we will have the publication from that probably by April, May timeframe. So again, much of that trial was in the pandemic time period. So we're able now to look at what the experience was in that particular segment of the trial from March 15th onward. And I can tell you there's a lot of different things that happened during that period than what we had imagined when we designed the trial.
And do you have a meeting where you plan to present the abstract? Is there a sort of a publication plan?
Yeah, there's a publication plan. Of course, all of these publication plans are hopeful and dependent upon a lot of different things. We don't know the outcome of the trial yet, but our goals are to submit that as a late-breaking clinical trial for the American College of Cardiology meeting, which has been moved from March to May, and then to have hopefully a simultaneous publication of the full results of the one-year follow-up at the same time.
Maybe you breathed a sigh of relief when that meeting was moved from March to May.
I will breathe a sigh of relief. I will tell you that it's hard enough. This is one of the largest device trials ever done. It's certainly the largest hemodynamic guided care trial ever done. And then to have this interloping pandemic come about in the midst of follow-up, when we get this done and reported, it will be a big sigh of relief.
Well, I think this is going to be fascinating because it really will sort of test the proposition of remote care. And then it overlaps with what we were talking about in the beginning of the conversation, where we have people with an underlying condition that maybe makes them more vulnerable to what are in effect the inflammatory consequences of the infection by this virus. So it will bring several themes together, I think. So that's it's fascinating. It makes for a good story, and it also maybe will lead to people living longer, healthier lives, which is really what this is supposed to be all about, right?
That's exactly what it's all about. And when you see patients suffer long-term with the fear, with the restrictions of their lifestyle that's imposed by this horrible disease of heart failure, and how brittle and unexpected things can happen to them, and then you watch them blossom with the freedom that they get with effective remote care, it inspires you to continue and have the perseverance to do what needs to be done to get this to as many humans as possible.
Well, that's an optimistic note, and in a time where it's can be hard to find optimism, I think maybe we should leave it there. So thank you for your time this afternoon. It's gotten a little dark around my face, but I think looks like I'm getting ready for Halloween or something. But anyway, thank you for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure, and thank you, Peter, for taking the time.